Hey guys, welcome back to ZaneCustoms. So, as you saw, this time we're going to be working on a Darth Vader watercolor piece that I've been actually really excited about for quite a while. Had this in my head for years now and finally decided to sit down and do it. And you can see here I'm in Sketchbook and I took an actual photo, an actual screenshot from Star Wars Episode 6, and I'm just editing it in an app called Sketchbook. And this is from nearly the end of episode 6, where you actually get to see Darth Vader with his mask off for the first time, or maybe not the first time, I can't remember, but anyway, I just had this really cool idea, and I wanted to basically have a picture of him, but I still wanted it to be kind of when he's evil, so he's got the yellow eyes and, you know, doesn't necessarily look like he's struggling to survive like he is at the end of episode 6. And also kind of had this nice red glow going over, like maybe he's got his lightsaber on, just kind of off camera. But anyways, my point is that I'm basically just using this as reference photos to basically get an idea of what I want my actual watercolor piece to look like. And I couldn't find any symmetrical photos of Darth Vader with his mask off here in like anywhere that I looked all over the internet, so I decided to go ahead and make my own. And once I got this done, I actually hop over to Procreate because it's a little bit more powerful and easier to use. And I color in his eyes yellow. Again, I want it to be evil, and add in this nice red glow. And then I'm going to hop into painting here. And I already got it sketched out on my board. And right now, in this stage, I basically just try to get the board as wet as possible and try and block in colors. Super basic, not worried about too much. And I'll end up throwing some salt in on the end to add some nice texture. And you can see there, this is a while later after it's already dried. The salt absorbs some of the water, so it leaves kind of a weird texture left behind. And like I said, his skin's kind of this old, pale, nasty, almost decaying looking skin, and the salt texture kind of helps to get me a little bit closer to what I'm going for there. And now I'm just blacking out the background. In the actual photo, or the digital photo that I was painting up, the background's a little bit more of a dark blue, but in this I just wanted everything to be as dark as possible so that the red highlights on his skin and his armor and everything really started to pop. So I'm just trying to darken everything, and you'll see pretty much everything about this painting ends up being completely black in the end, just because I want it to be dark and creepy. And again, this is not Darth Vader at the end of episode 6 when he's turned good and saved Luke and, you know, trying to do the right thing. This is meant to be, you know, Darth Vader in the middle of all his evil doings and still very much a bad guy. And like I said here, I'm doing pretty much everything in black and just flipping the canvas upside down when I need to help that black kind of blend down through the rest of the canvas. And one thing I thought I'd mention, because I don't know how many people do this, or if you know, if anybody that's even watching paints, but this is watercolor, and I actually wrap this watercolor paper on a canvas. It's probably done by a lot of people, but as far as I've known, like going through school and stuff, nobody I met ever did this. They'd always just staple their watercolor to a piece of plywood or something while they painted. But I really like this because it's the same process. You just soak your watercolor paper to let it expand, and then once you let it soak in water for, you know, a couple minutes, you go ahead and wrap it around a frame and staple it in place. And then as it dries, it gets really nice and tight. So you'll see throughout the video, I don't know if you'll be able to notice, but sometimes if the canvas is really wet, it'll start to sag, but once it's all dry again, it tightens up, so that doesn't really matter. But yeah, I really like this because once it's done, it's finished. If you just have watercolor paper, and you know, it could look really good when it's done, but then you have to frame it or put it in mat board or something. But this, you know, if you're trying to do it for a little bit cheaper and not worry about framing or anything, the canvas, or wrapping the canvas on frame can actually turn out really nice. And one thing I thought I'd mention as soon as possible is this isn't a tutorial for watercolor painting at all. This is just how I like to paint, and it's definitely not, you know, the way I was taught in school or anything. This is just kind of like how I like to paint with watercolor. And I end up going over a lot of my finished watercolor pieces with colored pencils and different things, so it's very mixed media. But yeah, this is definitely not a tutorial of any sense. Most the watercolor tutorial videos I watch, they don't really paint like this. This is just kind of my own style. But what I'm trying to do here is really just block out the colors as much as possible in these early stages. There's certain things I got to look out for. Like you can see here, his mouthpiece to his helmet. A lot of that is going to be a light gray or even white because it's metal, so it's got a really bright highlight on there. So I don't want to get any paint on that as much as possible. Just try and paint around that and really just focusing on his face and like his mouth and just different things like that at this point. And again, just blocking colors out, not too focused on fine detail quite yet. And like I said, since I'll be going over this piece with colored pencils as like a final pass, I'm really not too worried about those fine details. I will eventually try and paint as much of them as possible with the actual watercolor paint, but if there's some that are too hard to paint, or if I mess up, or if I don't get say the light quite right, the red light on his nose or on his eyelids or something like that, I can always go over it with a lighter colored pencil and fix that. So I'm not really too worried about all those little details. The thing that was actually a big struggle throughout this process though was getting the background as dark as I wanted it, and it was a struggle because I went so dark with the black on his face because I was going off my digital reference photo again, which black in digital is, it's pure black. You can't really get that with watercolor. But I still tried as much as possible. I did multiple coats of black in the background and on his body, or excuse me, multiple coats across his face, and just try to get it as dark as possible. Because again, watercolor, you mix water with it to thin it, so even when it looks like it's pitch black when you paint it on there, once it dries, it's going to be a really dark gray, but not really as black as you might be wanting. So I ended up doing quite a bit of coats, and I'm actually happy with how black it is, but it's not real true black like you would get in digital painting. And that is true of any color, not just black. So you'll see throughout the video I'll paint some red highlights across his head or his nose or whatever, and it'll look really strong and really vibrant red. But as it dries, it's watercolor, again, it's somewhat translucent, so it's never really as bright and as strong of a red color, or of any color for that matter, as you're originally intending. But like I mentioned, for most of these, if they're not quite what I'm wanting them to look like, I will be able to fix that with the colored pencils. The black though, I'm not going to color the whole background with a black colored pencil, so I really try to get that as dark as possible with my paints. See me painting some red, you can see how strong that red color is, and that'll actually come out fairly well if you're just going right on top of the canvas, right on top of the white. But if you're painting this red on top of say something you've already painted black, for example, like I do quite a bit in this video, then yeah, it'll end up fading quite a bit. But that's something I just try to be mindful of as I'm painting. Just like the mouthpiece that's going to end up being white, try not to get too much black on there, or any if at all, so that when I do want to add some color there, it's nice and bright, and it's exactly what I want, and it doesn't end up looking washed out because of the black color that could have been underneath. And here I'm going over with a sponge, and the sponge is basically just to help give a little bit of randomized texture. You can see I'm using two different ones that gives really big, really drastic random splotches, and then one that kind of helps blend it a little bit better. And I'm just trying to do that to help bring out a little bit more of the randomness, or the random texture in his skin, which is nice because I still have that underlayer of salt that affected the paint, and the salt's not still on there, you brush that off, but that layer that was affected by the salt helps give a lot of random detail underneath. But the sponge is helping me a little bit more, especially with the black shadows on the side of his face and the red highlights, I end up going darker with those than I originally thought I was going to. So using the sponge kind of helps me blend from the really dark, pure black areas over into the middle of his face that's got the blues and the reds, rather than just using a brush. Not that you can't blend. Obviously, watercolor blends incredibly easy because it's just water. But I wanted kind of a random gradient between the black and the blue, to help highlight the texture, and the sponge works really well in that instance. And one thing I found that you had to be really careful with while painting this was you don't want it to look like it's a picture of Darth Vader with red lipstick on or red paint on his nose or something like that. You want it to look like it's a highlight, like it's his lightsaber is on, right behind the camera, right in front of him, and it's leaving this nice red glow across his face. And that was kind of a struggle, and it's something that when I get to the color pencil stage, I think helps it a lot, because it didn't quite look right. But yeah, because just taking the red watercolor and going over his nose or his lips or something to again and again doesn't really give the effect of glowing that I was going for. But overall, at this point, I'm actually really happy with it. And again, I know that I'm going to be doing colored pencils at the end, so I'm not too worried. There's a few things that I'll end up fixing in the colored pencil stage, but for the most part, everything's looking good. All I got to do now is darken up the background again. And what I ended up doing here is using a little bit of blue with my black to get a really dark, strong color, because I was thinking that it might be too black with having the black background and then his black upper body blending together. I thought it might look a little weird, so I ended up adding a little bit of blue in there and then adding more black on his body to help highlight the difference between the two, which I think ended up looking pretty good. Again, just because I didn't want it to look like his head was just kind of floating there in the middle of nowhere. The canvas is still wet. I'm going to go ahead and add in some red lights in the background, and this I just get a lot, and I mean a lot, of red pigment or paint on my brush and paint this in. And again, I know since the background's so dark that this red won't be as strong as it looks here. It'll end up fading, so I got to make sure that I put quite a bit of red paint on there, and then I'll end up brightening it up later on with the colored pencils. And now here I'm just kind of going over the whole thing with a little bit of black paint to darken the base a little bit, but also just to go over the face and kind of blend things together. If you have really nice watercolor paper, it doesn't matter how long you wait, the colors will still blend together. If you add more water later on, or if I soaked this whole thing and took out a brush with really short bristles and just scrub the crap out of it, I'd be able to get a lot of color bleeding out of this canvas, and I wouldn't be able to get everything, but I'd be able to get a surprising amount. And that's what's so nice about really nice, high quality watercolor paper. You're always able to go over and continue working on these things and blending them and different things like that. And here you can see now I'm finally onto the colored pencil stage, and this is one of my favorite parts of the whole process. I think my best art form is colored pencils followed by watercolor, at least traditionally, not speaking about digital. I just think colored pencils is where I really shine, because for most of my life I've been drawing with the pencil, obviously, and then wasn't really until high school that I started painting, so I don't have as much experience, and I don't do it as often. But colored pencils, it's just like drawing with pencil, except for obviously you have colors, so it's just easy for me. It's more intuitive, and it's easier for me to control the color that goes down, and just everything about it is so much better. And I really started to love this piece even more once I started going in with the colored pencils and adding in some different highlights and details. And for any of you who might be wondering, the colored pencils I'm using are called Prismacolor. They're top of the line colored pencils, my favorite colored pencil that I've ever used. They work amazing. And the watercolor I'm using, I actually have no idea. I've had this watercolor set since high school. My art teacher made it for me, and I honestly don't know what the brand is or anything. I know it's really nice, really high quality paints, but I don't know what brand they are. And this is also another benefit of using a really nice high quality watercolor paper, is you can go over it with your colored pencils here, which might be surprising to some people, but I recently have used some low quality watercolor paper, and when you're painting on that with watercolor, it definitely feels like, you know, you're just using a Crayola marker. It just doesn't react well, the colors don't blend, the water absorbs into the paper but doesn't help transfer the color across. It's a struggle to use, and it was the same with the colored pencils. It just doesn't carry the color the same way. You can't blend it as well, and it's just not nice. I definitely recommend getting nice watercolor paper if you're going to be doing something like this. And that was just a little bit of tape there to help me get a nice straight line on his the jaw piece to his helmet. And you also notice that I pretty much didn't do anything with his helmet because throughout the course of painting it, I was kind of struggling with little details like that, so I just decided to do all of that with the colored pencils once I got to that stage. And yeah, you can really see the benefit of using colored pencils here, because the color just lays right on top, and you don't have to worry about it blending or fading once it dries. It does dry, it is what it is. You lay it down, you see it, that's what it is. And if it's not looking quite how you want, you can go in with your finger and smudge it or blur it or add other colors on top of it, and it just works so well. And that's not to say that you can't get this same effect with watercolor alone. I think if you were to plan it out and take your time doing a piece like this, you could obviously get the nice white highlights or red highlights that you want without worrying about the black overtaking it. You just have to be more careful. But unfortunately, I was kind of on a deadline with this piece. I needed to get it done quick, so that's part of the reason I was relying so heavy on the colored pencils to get this done. Normally, I still like to use colored pencils at the end of a piece just to, you know, fix any issues I might have, but normally I would take my time and try to do more of it with the watercolor. But again, I was on a deadline, so I needed to finish this piece quick. But you know, some people might prefer more of a traditional watercolor look, and some people might prefer a colored pencil look, and I myself really like being able to mix and match the two, and you know, just really make it my own piece. This is kind of, like I said, this is my style, so obviously I'm happy with the way it turned out. So here's the final piece. Again, I'm over the moon, super happy with it. Love the way it turned out. I would absolutely love to hear what you guys think down in the comments. If you like this piece, if you like seeing me do these paintings, or if you prefer just the digital sculpting and stuff like that. Regardless, I just want to say thanks so much for watching. Super appreciate everybody that's willing to like, comment, subscribe, anything like that. And I'll see you in the next one.